Justin, thank you so much for being here. Amazing to get to chat to you. Couldn't be more excited to dig into a bunch of different stuff that you've been working on. But maybe we could just start with a little bit about your journey and how you kind of ended up doing what you're doing today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here as well. It's been an interesting road to get to the seat that I sit in today. I would say that, going way back and won't go too far into it, but my first job out of college was selling photocopiers and scanners, literally walking door to door in San Francisco. I had 5 zip codes and was handing out flyers and trying to figure out how much people paid per page on their printing. Um, that that was a hell of an intro to sales and business, but very quickly realized I'm like, wait a minute, I'm in San Francisco. This was like 2011. There's this tech industry booming around me, and I'm selling copiers. So I made the switch to tech, in general, and landed at an ad tech startup. Um, Bounced around, mobile advertising for a couple of years. Um, Combination of like ad networks and just general ad sales. Moved further away from sales into more of a BD and like kind of building out new product lines from the BD perspective. Obviously not the technical perspective, but helping find the business case for going into new markets and new directions, um, which led me to basically helping start a company in Berlin through an incubator accelerator program that one of the companies I worked at had a really great way of spinning off new ideas into companies. And one of those ideas was one that I was behind. And I got the chance to help start a company and build up a team to, pretty solid numbers. Spent a lot of time traveling to Berlin and back. Um, at a certain point, though, decided that, I wanted to stay a little more local and switch directions a little bit and get my way more into like the media entertainment space, and landed at THX, which is the George Lucas company. A lot of people remember THX from the movie theaters, maybe in the 90s, going to see Jurassic Park or something, and the movie starts with the loud noise. But THX did a lot more than that, and a lot of really cool technology and research around how audio is delivered and working with consumer electronics. But my role there was really to take a really old school legacy brand that everybody knew THX, and modernize it, essentially get it into new lines of business. So worked on streaming video, which is actually how I met the folks that I work with today. Virtual reality, live events, like we did the sound for Beyonce's Formation tour, which is really fun. That company got acquired, and that led me to AWS, which is like a totally different part of my career, but like it all kind of built on each other how I got there. And AWS is where we met a couple of years ago. So at AWS, I worked for about a little over 3 years, doing partnerships for startups in general. There were two teams that I worked on at AWS, and really the key theme that tied it all together was like, how do I help startups figure out how to navigate AWS, and not just AWS, but specifically the partnership world of AWS. Um, it took me 6 months at AWS to really figure out what my job was, because AWS is so big and like the cloud was still pretty new to me. Um, Figuring out where I fit into, let alone my partner's business, but like the AWS business, took a long time to really grasp. And then it took me about 9 months, so six to figure out my job. It took me about 9 months in to get good at my job, and really enjoyed the time there. Um, Met so many amazing people, and got to work on some really cool things. Um, a couple years on the partner side, and then I worked on the marketplace team, where one of my favorite things about AWS was how fluid they let you be as far as switching teams, and just like finding whatever you want to do to grow and be happy. Um, and on the marketplace side, I got to work with VCs and private equity firms and their portfolios to help them understand how, why, and when to work with the marketplace. And related to that was working with the partner teams at AWS. So a couple of years there has made me a pretty solid expert at how to partner with AWS. Um, reached out to my current boss just to check in, and turned out, you know, they were looking for me. They were looking for somebody with, direct experience navigating the complex web of AWS. And so now I'm over at Mux, where I lead cloud partnerships, including AWS and GCP. I've been here for almost a year, and it's quite a change going from one of the biggest companies in the world to, I think I was like the 103rd employee here, and now we're pushing 200. Where that would be like a small marketing arm of one of the sub teams of AWS. So yeah, it's been fun.
Amazing, amazing. I can't wait to dig into a bunch of that. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the formation tour first. So, like, how involved were you in that? What was it? What was THX doing? And like, what exposure did you get to that?
So I did get to go, and I got to
No
take
way.
my then girlfriend, now wife, got to come, and she thought I had the coolest job in the world for one day when we got fourth row seats to the Beyonce show down in Santa Clara. Um, but so THX worked really closely with Beyonce's management and like the sound teams that they already had, to like fine tune for large arenas. And it was kind of a digital package around that of like, how are they delivering audio over the internet and things related to that. And a lot of it was branding for Beyonce. Like, she really liked being able to say that, like, my, I can't speak for her, and she probably doesn't know who I am, but like, she, um, the tour really liked the branding around that deep note, is what we call it at THX. Like,
Mm.
to be able to start every show with like, this has been like, you're in for a treat when you hear that noise come up. So, we worked with them on, I think about 50 shows throughout the country, just working side by side with their sound engineers, and fine tuning the audio for like, how big can we make it while still being crisp. Um, that was supposed to turn into a whole new business arm of THX. And I'll tell you, like, starting with Beyonce as your first um, customer, I guess, is a really great way to get your foot in the door. We were talking to so many big opportunities. And then the company got acquired, and that put a pause to a lot of the new development that was in motion. So I didn't get to see that through. I gave it a good stab, but it definitely didn't turn out to be a roaring success. So the highlight was definitely getting to go see Beyonce on tour, which I wasn't a big Beyonce fan, and after seeing that concert, I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see her. I actually went with my mum to see her at Wembley Arena back in the UK when I was a lot younger, right when she kind of went solo from Destiny's Child. And so, like, there's Wembley Arena and then there's Wembley Stadium. And I don't know whether she wasn't. So, Wembley Stadium is like the huge, big stadium where the English football team play. Like, a bunch of other sports happen there as well. And, like, it's big stadium venue. And then there's Wembley Arena, and it's like a small kind of old crappy venue, but like, I don't know whether they like mixed up the two or whether she wasn't like a big
She
enough
wasn't ready
name.
for the big
Yeah,
stage.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Maybe she wasn't big enough at the time, but we ended up seeing her in Wembley Arena, which is this like kind of smaller crappy studio, not
oh, that's
studio,
cool.
venue. But it was amazing. Yeah, and she was incredible. It was like kind of a mind-blowing performance. And so, like, tell us a little bit about the startups team at AWS, and like, Amplitude. We were fortunate enough to kind of partner together on that a little bit, and
Hmm.
I was actually speaking to Dan from Amplitude recently, and still, like, AWS is kind of their hallmark, like, strategic partner, based off of that work that you did. So obviously you did a good job there, but like, like, what's the goal for AWS? Like, how are you picking startups? Tell me, give us the download.
Yeah, I mean, there's one common reality at AWS that rules all teams, and that is like customers first. And I think that's what makes AWS different than a lot of the other players in the space. Is like, it's truly part of the DNA, and it's the ultimate way to squash any argument or miscommunication. Is like, as long as you know you're doing the right thing for the customer, you can do so many cool things, which was super unique, I think. And partners straddled an interesting line of like, well, are they customers first or are they partners first? Um, of course, the goal of the partnership world at AWS was ultimately to help AWS's business grow. A lot of it started with, deployed software in a customer's AWS. So like databases, things like that, or security and networking tools that add on to somebody's AWS world. Most startups, though, are not building that kind of software where it deploys somewhere else. They're hosting it themselves. It's a SaaS product. And so this is where some of that gap between like what's the value for the partner or the customer, who's defined as the customer, started to become a little confusing for startups, where a lot of I think the AWS partner world was built for partners that were supporting customers through that deployment model, the first customer deployed way. And it was a very clear uplift in spend on the AWS platform. And the win-win was very clear for all the teams involved. But when startups and SaaS products really became dominant, it didn't perfectly add up. So the team that I was on, and so it not adding up was just like, what's the value for everybody involved here, right? All of the co-sellers, all of the teams involved. There was a very clear win for the customer, for the partner if they got a deal. But what about the reps on the AWS side? Who's getting paid when, depending on where the software is hosted? Became a little bit of a gray area. So the team that I was on was kind of a pilot when I joined, and now is like a key part of the company, that was really trying to figure out, how do we give startups the same level of support that somebody like Splunk might get, or somebody like Snowflake might get. At the time, we're just behemoths compared to some of the Series A, B, C, D companies that I was talking with. And so we were an experiment to say, like, what happens if we over-index on, white glove support for a lot of guessing, a lot of educated guessing on who we should work with. So we had kind of an index of VC backing, founder history, revenue trajectory. There was a small component of like, how much of an AWS customer were you, that was factored in, but that was actually one of my favorite parts about like the partners that I got to choose, was like, I actually didn't care how much they spent on AWS. And like, that might have been one of the first things I told you, was like, I don't care. I'm not here to sell you AWS. I'm here to help you figure out how to sell more of your stuff to the AWS world, because rising tides lift all boats, and that was the theory. So that's really held true. And part of the selection process for my team was, it was kind of like, who do you think is hot right now? Who do you like? Go with your gut. And like they hired a team of ex VCs, ex founders, ex startup employees, and we kind of worked together to figure out who we should work with. Over time, it got a little more segmented into like, data and analytics, networking, security, and you'd start to specialize as the program evolved. I think my favorite part about that couple of years there was like working with folks like you and Amplitude, but just across the board, I got a really unique kind of eagle eye, bird's eye view of so many hot startups and how they worked and what made them tick. And like, is their founder a jerk, or like, or is this a company I want to go work for one day? So it was kind of like, seeding my future of like, hey, like, one of these days I'll probably end up at one of these startups. And I got to kind of sample a little bit of the working style. The companies that stick out, like Amplitude was definitely one of my favorite to work with. I really liked working with Segment. Like the people there were all just really, really fun to work with. Same with Fivetran, and Mux. Like I managed my current company way back when, mainly because I knew like, hey, I wanted to stay close. I had met them at THX. When I joined AWS, and they were like, hey, you need to find some partners to manage. And I was like, let me see what these Mux guys are up to. And I realized, hey, they don't have anybody covering them. Like, I should keep that conversation going. But it was a really cool way to stay like close to so many cool companies, and get a sense of trends in the industries, and who's, kind of playing kingmaker almost. Not me personally, but getting a small taste of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like you kind of touched a little bit upon like, if a startup does get like business from the like the partnership, then that's a big win from them. Like how did you see some like startups doing a good job of that? Were there people that like particularly were successful in generating revenue from the partnership, or is even that the right way to like think about working with AWS through that startup program?
I think like it's changing, and at the time it wasn't the right way to think about it, because the teams and the protocols and the programs weren't in place to like really help drive revenue for a startup, right? It was more about awareness, top of funnel leads, um, like opportunity acceleration, which is really hard to measure and to convince a company to invest in. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like we need to take a bunch of your people's time for like a 2 to 3 year investment that like might not turn into anything. Was kind of the pitch, or like, was what the pitch boiled down to, right? Um, so ultimately, the goal was always, yes, can we help you find new revenue? But it was very clear very early on that like that was not what AWS was built for. Um, to find like AWS is never going to sell a startup software, but if you follow a certain set of steps and guidelines, like you can create opportunities to get into that revenue receiving mode, right? And that's I really describe it like I'm explaining it now to the current company that I work at. It's a lot like throwing darts, right? Where um, you just really need to cast a lot of different lines out there, and there's no one size fits all answer. There's no one way to 100% get a return on every single thing you do, but if you have 20 or 30 different feelers out there with different teams, some of them will turn into something that you can lean in on. And it's kind of a faith-based approach. Like, hold on and hope that this is going to happen, but it will if you put in the right process.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and have kind of talked about like planting seeds, and like you kind of have to plant seeds and a lot of goodwill, and you go back to water them once in a while and hope something
Yep.
sprouts. But it feels like that's often the case with the partnerships businesses where it's very hard to predict up front what like who's going to be the right person or how things are going to kind of play out. Like so you helped us navigate that the like is it called the ACE program? Is that right?
The APN
Yeah, APN
is,
program. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's right. Like so mad scientist moment, like you get to like redesign the whole thing. Like tell us a little bit about the APM program, and then also like what you would do differently like if you were in a position to do something like that now.
Gosh, there's so much I would do differently. I think the biggest thing is that it wasn't designed for, in my opinion, right? Like, it wasn't designed for um, ISVs first. It was definitely, and I wasn't there when it started, so like Amazon, don't hold me to this. This is not their messaging. This is my interpretation. Um, it really seems like a lot of the APN, which is the partner network at Amazon, was really focused on like consulting partners, systems integrators, and resellers, right? Like, and that makes a lot of sense. Like companies that can help with big migrations, off of Oracle or off of on-prem, um, that can multiply their sales force in certain ways that don't take time out of their sales force, right? Um, and then ISVs and tech partners started becoming more important, um, and kind of got jammed into like the programs and the process that was made for consulting partners. So a lot of the stuff that you and I were working on, like I knew it was just like checking boxes and spinning wheels, like, but it was necessary to kind of get you above the fray of all of the people that wanted to partner. So the first thing I would do is like essentially redesign it for technology and ISV partners. Um, I think there's a big issue with like discoverability of partners in Amazon, and this is also applicable to Google as well. Like it's really hard to be found as a partner. Um, and that means by multiple people, right? By like the sales teams at the partner. That means by the technology and teams that you integrate. That means by the end customer, right? Like who knows? Is there one central place where everybody knows to look for this? And the answer both companies is no. There's multiple places, right? So making it much easier to find the partner that you're looking for at the right time is the biggest thing that I would start with. Like, customer is looking for this solution. Where do they go? And it, like, designing a program around matchmaking the partner at that moment. And there were a number of like tangential part or like programs that were happening at AWS that almost could have bridged all of this together, but it didn't quite happen. So it would kind of be rebuilding it on focusing on the discoverability of a partner first, rather than like fitting in technology partners to the consulting partner world.
Interesting. And like that matchmaking, would that be like AWS reps? Like how does that kind of work? Like is there like an account manager or someone who's like working on a big account and they're listening for problems that they can help solve, or would that be like a AWS customer just like doing some searching themselves? Like how does that work?
Yeah, I think it's both of those realistically. Like, in the dream state is like AWS customer says like, I have a problem with like, network security, right? And how can the how can AWS create, like, based on the information they know about the customer, like the best recommendation for a partner in that moment? And in an ideal state, that's automatic. That's like check out X, Y, and Z, right? Um, it is, in the current state, is much more manual, and it's very partner led, right? So I think that's the other difference. Is like, it should be an AWS led motion, in my opinion. This is a dream state, right? If every partner that we worked with was just constantly finding ways to plug us into their customers, oh man, that's the dream state. So yeah, I think I had and the team that I was on really matched this, and they still do, and I still work with a lot of them, and like, they really do drive to find as many ways to elevate their partners in the very noisy world that is AWS. So, kind of making it a little streamlined and cleaned up, the discovery process, and just like AWS led would be ideal. And I think that's what everybody's asking for, is like, how can you get me more customers, right?
Hmm.
And I think it comes down to the discoverability of like, where do I look? Like, what are all these programs? What are all these subcategories? Like, how I don't have the answer, right? I don't have the machine learning capabilities to say like, in real time match customer with partner, but that's the dream state.
Yeah, yeah, because it's kind of beyond anyone's ability to be able to have a good read on all of the different products in the
Mm-hmm.
AWS ecosystem, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like that's it's a really interesting challenge, I think. And like so are those reps incentivized? Like for instance, I met someone from Salesforce one time that basically carried a quota for like partners products that were sold via Salesforce, and he had this ridiculous, I can't remember what the quota was, like $100 million a year or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Like are
Yeah.
there people that kind of
They
carry
are.
quota like that?
Yeah, they are. They're like both AWS and Google. So I don't work with Azure
Hmm.
yet, maybe someday. But both AWS and Google are, and I think AWS was first with this, but like, really working on making it more favorable for their account reps to work with partners. And I think there's changes in both of those large organizations that are shifting to more partner friendly. Um, so they get quota retirement in certain ways. If you're selling through the marketplace, they get bonuses and spiffs if you're in the right programs. Um, they have separate goals at AWS around just like referring deals to partners. But again, like, it's at the scale of AWS, like, there's hundreds of sales teams that have slightly different goals, and like, that's the dart throwing too, is you never know which rep you're getting connected with. Like, do they have 1,000 accounts that they've never spoken to any of them, or do they have one account that they can tell you what the CEO had for breakfast every day last week, right? Like, or anything in between that. And they all might have slightly different goals, but they are all going to get some quota burn down if you sell your product to the marketplace, which is like a really easy conversation starter, and they all support that. Um, I haven't seen them be too pushy about like, um, particularly pushing a partner's product over another one, and that goes back to the customer obsession side of things, where like, they're going to do what the customer wants. And if that's, even if you compete with AWS and they want you over the AWS product, they're going to happily help the customer get that. I found like the best path forward to actually getting like recommended is through the SAs, the solutions architects. And most accounts at AWS and Google do have a dedicated solutions architect. Getting the technical teams to understand your product and the benefit that it adds to their customer is going to be the number one way to get, hey, I heard about this company that does X, Y, and Z. This is a good fit for your exact use case. So that's been one of my goals this year, is like to branch out our technical education to folks at AWS and Google. Has been a really good way to kind of get the word out about us.
Yeah, that's smart. We kind of had a similar strategy at Amplitude, actually. Like, we called them educated champions, ECs. But
Mm-hmm.
like, we found the same thing, where it's like, hey, it's quite often like the technical people like on the accounts that are the people that are the gatekeepers for this kind of stuff, because they're going to be the ones that are the trusted expert when that conversation comes up, and there's a incentive for them to get educated on this stuff, because
Absolutely.
they want to have the answers when they're in the room. And so yeah, that resonates a lot. And so like like I want to, I don't want to spend too much time on the AWS stuff, but before we come off of it, like tell us a little bit about the marketplace team and like your experience on that team, and like how that differed from what you were doing on the partnership side.
Yeah, like it's funny because so many people, even at AWS, don't know the difference between the partner team and the marketplace team. And I think there might be some changes happening as we speak, but when I was there, like they were very clearly separate organizations, separate entities. Um, the way I look at the marketplace team, they're an actual service. They're a product that you integrate with. There's a technical component. There's other parts of that organization, like a control tower and all these like other sub services that, it's more like EC2 or S3 than the partner network is. Like, it's more like a core service in the way that it's run, where the partner network was more of a, kind of a general BD arm. Like, there were goals, there were technical components, like the SAs on the partner team were legit, but the organization was run more like a large BD org, versus the marketplace was run like an AWS service,
Mm.
which is totally different. So I found that like the data, the reporting, the rigor of document writing on the marketplace team was like 10 times as intense in a good way than the partner network. In general, though, like the reason I switched is it became very clear to me that um, the number one way to prove value as a partner in AWS was through revenue. Um, Revenue was not really tracked too well on the APN side versus the market. Like, it's very clear, if you transacted $500,000 through the marketplace, like that's booked, and if that helped you or not. So I just saw the trend of all of the top partners that I was working with were just totally ramping up their marketplace transactions, and their overall partnership was growing related to that versus anything else I saw in the APNs. I was like, I should check this team out. And it just really seemed like the way that the general business world was moving, like consolidated billing and the connection to your cloud commitment. And the fact that like a company like Amplitude, for example, I pushed you guys really hard to get to the marketplace. I think that just happened recently,
Mm-hmm.
by the way. But like, if you didn't have a really clear better together story, which is like step one of the partnership with any partner, the marketplace was the shortcut to that,
Mm-hmm.
because you could get the sales reps attention by burning their quota, right? And like, it might not have been the most detailed and beautiful and perfect better together story, but like, you've got an incentive for the customer, because if they have a commitment, they're burning that down by buying you through the marketplace, and you've got an incentive for the sales rep. And I was like, hey, if you were totally far out of this better together world, here's a starting point, and you can start. So I saw that as like a kind of universal truth, which is why I wanted to start to switch over.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
awesome. Like, do you think that there's just something in the DNA of building a marketplace and, like it has to live with product and engineering people to at least to start with? It feels like pretty much every company, the marketplace either starts its life with product and engineering or like just lives with product engineering forever.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't really have any strong thoughts on that. It just like thinking about how the AWS marketplace started, it was more geared towards engineers than business people and procurement teams, which it is kind of now more towards procurement teams. It was like I imagine this is like a lot of products that were built because somebody wanted something like this. So like, hey, like, if I'm building my application on AWS, I would like to easily buy a new like try new software that pairs with it and just click a button and it connects. Like, so I think it makes a lot of sense that it started in that org. I don't know about too many others, and I feel like I've seen a lot of marketplaces popping up that like are all there's like marketplace platforms now, like
Hmm.
marketplace as a service, that people are kind of like forking out white labeled marketplaces.
Yeah.
So I think it definitely started that way, but it seems like it's going everywhere, and there might be too many now.
Yeah, I think like it's a really interesting one where like, if you are the owner of an ecosystem or a marketplace, you potentially are the category leader, in your
Yep.
space. Whoever
Yep.
whoever is the central point, like everything else orbits around that. And you can kind of say that for Salesforce, you can say that for AWS, and you can say that like for a handful of other companies on the planet. And so like I think aspirationally, like for companies where there isn't a category leader in the space, it makes a lot of sense to kind of say,
Yeah,
hey, can we be the sun? Because everyone wants to be the sun, right? Like,
that's right.
yeah, uh,
Take your couple percentage points along the way each
exactly.
hit.
Yeah, because like I think people are starting to put two and two together and realize, yeah, like that is what the app store is, or what the play store is, or any of these other places. It's like a very, like what Roblox has done isn't too different from what Salesforce has done with their like
Yeah,
marketplaces.
and that kind of like related to the App Store. That's a common um, comparison I would make in that the AWS marketplace, and this goes back to discoverability, right? Is like it's not something people are just browsing, right? Like they're like I haven't browsed the App Store in a while, but like when I was in mobile ad tech, yes, I certainly was browsing the app stores. But like you might be looking for a new note taking app, and you would go browse through, or looking for, but if you know you're going to download Uber, you just go download Uber, for example. Um, it's more like that in the marketplaces, where people aren't just casually saying like, let's see what kind of new networking security products are listed today. It's like you kind of got to be there and know you want to buy it. So I think that's a gap, though. It's like how do you make it searchable, or how do you make it so that people want to buy from it instead of being led there? Or do you even need to?
Hmm.
I maybe not, because I think it's working pretty well right now if you know how to like lead with your sales team to lead people into the marketplace. I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, and yeah, like are there particular companies that do really well in these marketplaces versus others?
Yes, definitely. And it's so funny thing about the startups is like what I would see more often than not with startups is, we could talk to any startup we wanted to at AWS. It was pretty easy to get on the phone with the right people or close to the right people. And they'd see all the work alongside getting listed. They'd see the fees with each transaction. They'd be like, we just don't really have people asking for this. And then on the other side, and so like with Amplitude, I think that was the case. A lot of the partners that I worked, it just didn't seem like it was worth the uplift at the time, like 2018-ish. But then you'd have a startup come screaming through, like, I had to get listed on the marketplace tomorrow because Fortune 500 company has a $3 million deal on the table that they will not take any other way than through the marketplace. And it's like, oh, okay, well now you see the value there. So um, that was what I would explain that to a lot of people. It's like, yeah, it's the kind of thing that it's I'd rather be there and not need to be there than need to be there and not be there on the marketplaces. So the companies that were proactive and like getting listed before they really needed to were certainly good. Um, it's more about the DNA than the product type, the DNA of the company. Like, did you do a good job of preparing your business and finance and legal and the overall operation of a new procurement method, right? Because it's particular. I work mainly with startups, right? So this was a brand new motion for all of them. So the prep work going into it and like being ready for your first deals to go through, aligning your billing, aligning their expectations, aligning your technology teams to understand like how to provision somebody if it's different, what they're entitled to when they buy through a marketplace or not. Um, that's to me the bigger lift than the actual technical integration, because I don't think the tech. Again, speaking probably out of turn, but I don't think the technical integration is that big of a lift. I think it's the multiple team alignment. So a lot of cases you'll get companies that, it's led by by a partner manager, BD person, saying, I've got to get on the marketplace, but not having that full cross company alignment. Um, they're going to run into trouble down the road when it starts to hit scale, or when there's a refund that has to go through and they didn't line up with their finance team, or like they charge somebody that's already provisioned directly. Like, there's all these little one-offs that if you don't have everybody kind of on the same page before you start transacting, can really come back to bite you later.
Love that. Yeah, that's awesome. And like shifting gears a little bit. So like obviously you're now like AWS Jedi, like you're doing that. It's like you're kind of like people that work at the IRS, and then they get
Yeah,
hired as like a tax consultant at some like big five firm afterwards. Like
yeah.
you know the ins and outs. Like, so how are you navigating that program now that you're like on the other side of the table?
I'll tell you, it is like following a playbook that I wrote, but I didn't really write it. Like it was. It's just practicing what I've been preaching for the
Hmm.
past couple of years. So like every single thing that I ever recommended to a startup to do, I'm leading and driving here. And at the same time, I'm realizing a lot of it's harder than I pitched at AWS. Like, I was like, why don't you just get like this team to do that for you? Come on, like they did it. So it's a fun challenge, right? It's
Hmm.
like I know exactly the finish line that we can be working towards, and I know exactly the steps to take along the way. Some of the steps are taking longer than expected, but that's fine, right? Like they're not. There's no blockers. There's no major like holdups. It's just like this whole partnership motion is pretty new to my company. So there's a lot of re-education, there's a lot of reminders, and there's a lot of me remembering that like, no, this is not like, we are not from day one, we are going to be the number one partner of AWS, like, or GCP. Like it's a new project for
Hmm.
everybody involved. So there's a lot of re-education. There's a lot of just documentation and explaining like why we're doing this, what this could lead to, who needs to be involved, and so a lot of table setting, right? But I think we're in such a great position right now to really turn the gas on and scale it up, because we did. I think this is one of the things I've done well here, is take the time to do a lot of this operational alignment and not going too heavy on co-sell or anything like that until we had some building blocks in place, like the marketplace, like the ISV spiff programs, getting some of these things ready before we got the sales team too distracted by an entirely new motion. Doing as much as I could to kind of tease them with good reasons to like getting them their own spiff, for example, or finding them AWS credits to give their customers. So I'm really just following a lot of the little best practices I've seen from 20 or 30 different partners over the past couple of years, and also just some of my best advice that I would give partners when I worked at AWS was like, bug the shit out of me. I don't know
Hmm.
if I can say that.
You
Bug
can.
the crap out of me, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease, whatever you
Yeah.
want to say. Like, there are so much going on at AWS, and I guarantee you, I am not top of mind for anybody there unless I'm constantly reminding them what I'm doing and constantly asking them for stuff and constantly saying like, hey, what's going on here? Can we plug in here? because like otherwise they're just going to give it to the other partner that's asking for it, or the other hottest item of the day or the week. So it's a lot of that kind of management too, of just relentlessly, getting in front of as many people all the time, everywhere, to work all of those different angles.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. And I think that's so much just like shaking the tree all the time. I think it's like so much of the job as well. And so like it's that you know how tough it is. I think everyone knows how tough it is to do partnerships in general, but especially with a company that's much bigger than yours. And it takes time, right? And also it's not going to be like referrals out of the wahoo straight away, right? Like how did you set expectations at Mux and like kind of get people bought into, hey, this is a journey, and like this is what we're going to be doing over like X time horizon?
Yeah, I think like a lot of so before I came here, and my current boss and like the CEO, we talked a lot about some of this stuff. So I did some prep work to kind of see what the feeling was here. Um, I think it was pretty clear that it was going to be a journey already, but I kind of reinforced a lot of that. Um, a lot of the investments are long-term bets. I laid out some of the basic actions that I wanted to do and what they would lead to. But it goes back to just like re-education, and like I spent a lot of time on a framework of like how we need to shift our thinking and what this could lead to. And luckily, having come from AWS, like there were a couple of doors that were a little bit easier for me to open really quickly and show some quick value of me in the position, that in turn, gained more executive trust to do more things and try new things. Um, but also like I'm kind of relentless. I'm kind of don't take no for an answer. And a lot of the cross-functional stuff that was a total shocker to new people. And I say shocker in just that like it was new to them. Like they never considered running a partner marketing campaign or something like that. Wherever I could and as best as I could, I would just go do it. And whether it's a blog post or getting us to an event or something like that, and show people like, hey, I know we all don't have time for this, but like, look what we can get if we do this. And we should do that better because I'm not a marketer or I'm not a salesperson or whatever, right? Like we can build a system around this and take it further. So as much as I could, kind of just like peppering people with like, all right, like here's a little tease. Now get the right people to actually run this, and I'll support it behind the scenes and all these things.
Yeah, yeah, showing those wins is so important, and being
And
able
the
to
and the
just
wins are the wins can be anything
yeah.
at the early stages, right? It's like what did they retweet something? That could be a win. Like, did we get accepted to a program? Why is that a win? Like, did we get a discount on something? Like, and broadcasting that, and like I'm sure there's some people at Mux that are like, can you shut up about AWS already? But I'm like, that's that's the reality.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love it. You have to kind of shout from the rooftops about every and like no matter what size, every single win that you can get. Like how's it been working with GCP versus AWS? Obviously, like I don't want to put you in a hot spot because you're working
No,
with them
it's
both, but
cool.
like how
It's
do the
cool.
programs differ? What's the experience like?
Well, okay, so I have an unfair advantage, right? Coming from the position that I did. Um, I get the sense that we can and we will have a thriving business with GCP. We don't quite yet, right? On the partner side.
Hmm.
Um, and that's more because I've had a lot of learning to do of what all the systems are. We've had a couple different account managers and partner managers. Um, my take is that GCP is just not as built out as AWS, and that web of multiple, like I know at AWS that we can make a strategy with the startup team, with the digitally native business team, with the media and entertainment team, and then each one of those teams has different ways they support customers and partners, and they have different marketing and sales motions, and all this stuff is built in. Like it's a little more of a gray area for me with GCP. And I think it's just because they don't have as many people, and the partner world there is just as new as GCP is to cloud. So you could say safely that AWS has a 6 or 7 year head start on GCP in general, because AWS existed 6 or 7 years before GCP. So take 6 or 7 years of enterprise company development, and that's just the nature of it right now. And I don't think anybody at GCP would disagree with that, and like they're not shy to say that, like, no, we're still like kind of building it. They are showing really good signs of like earnest willingness to be creative, right? Like they might not have the programs in place, but they are willing to try new things, probably a little bit more than AWS, where AWS is a little more formulaic, a little more systemic. GCP is a little more willing to try something they've never done before, and put stuff out there like that. I do still think that kind of like they kind of need the team that I joined at AWS at GCP right now. Like, we're not a whale. We are not, $100 million a year customer of GCP, and we're not putting $100 million a year of revenue through their marketplace. So, this is why my team at AWS started, was like, how can we support the startups that aren't doing that? I don't think that quite exists at GCP yet. I think they wanted to. I've seen some of the hires they made. They brought a bunch of people over from AWS startups. So like, it's a matter of time before they start to build that stuff out. But I just don't think it's fully there yet.
Love it, super helpful. So like the way that we often end these conversations is asking something that you recently learned that you could share with the folks listening in.
Well, I was thinking about this, and I just got married, and I spent so much time, which was great. Like, the wedding was incredible. We spent so much time planning to make it perfect for our guests, and I really think it was. We had the time of our lives. But I was thinking, I was like, I could tell people how to plan a 3-day wedding in another city. Honestly, so the reason I brought that up is, like, I haven't actually had like any great breakthroughs in new knowledge, because I've been so focused on getting the wedding through. And so after that, though, we just started a program at Mux. So we do online video, right? You can think of us kind of like Stripe or Twilio for video. Like, it's a super complex problem that we make really easy with an API. I'm not a video expert. I know a bit about the industry. I have some experience in like the streaming world from my work at THX, and I've been learning a lot since I've been here. But we just started a video night school, which is really cool. That like our founders and like the technical leaders at the company are kind of taking anybody through a 10-week course. So one of the interesting facts that I just picked up is around roughly 80% of internet traffic is video. And like, okay, like, yeah, that's interesting on its own. It's really interesting working for a video company. It's like, oh, that's right. That's a good. I might have picked well. I hope. But like, I think that's kind of an astonishing number. So we're learning a ton in that class on like everything. So first of all, I love that I can have a class at my job, right? Like, we're kind of going to school at work too, and like, if you're not learning new things in your job, it's probably not a good place to be. And so we're learning things about like, like, why is 1080p the rectangular shape that it is? Well, it's because of your field of vision. So I'm going deep into that now. We just started the first course, but I'm excited to learn a lot more. I think I can proficiently talk about our products and how they fit into the space, but give kudos to our team for designing this program to make it really easy for anybody, whether you're already an expert or not. This might be something that they end up turning out to other folks as well. So yeah, that's kind of the newest learning mission that I'm on after I've cleared my brain out from prepping the wedding.
Yeah, that's an endeavor in itself. We we had to do 2 weddings because my family are all in the UK. My wife's family are all in the Bay Area, and so like it was unreasonable to try and expect
To get
anyone to
everybody in
meet
the
in the middle.
same, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about doing it somewhere like in Europe or something, but it was just going to be too much hard work, and so we ended up doing like 2 weddings, but kept them pretty simple and easy, like especially the second one. But both of them was like, it was really like dinner, really nice dinner, open bar, everyone have fun, like the good music, like
That sounds great.
yeah, as long as you hit those and you get to hang out with everyone a bunch, then
That's the
you're in a good
key.
spot.
People care about the food, is the bar moving quickly, and how's the music.
Yeah,
That's like all people leave with.
yeah.
And okay, maybe they, like, some people care about the flowers and stuff like that too.
Yeah, so yeah, I haven't met them yet, but so awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. That was like a masterclass in navigating marketplaces. So I appreciate all of the download, and I think people are
Yeah,
going to love listening to this. And congratulations on the path and everything that you're doing. It's been awesome. We kind of worked together a little bit at Amplitude, touched a little bit when I was at GGV, and you were on the marketplace team, and hopefully
yeah.
we'll find some more ways to do some stuff in the future as well.
It's great. I love the small world that we're in. How you're always gonna bump paths with so many good people. So, yeah, man, appreciate the time. We'll chat soon.
Love it. Thanks, Justin.
All right, see ya.